Good evening and welcome to Momentous Live, episode 112, broadcasting from a series of undisclosed locations. I'm Tristan Jutra.
I'm Will Sofer.
And down here, I'm Gray Williams.
In a very lab-like in this undisclosed location, which we look forward to learning more about, maybe a little bit later in the show and in subsequent shows. Good evening, gentlemen. Great to see you. Of course, our lovely and talented colleague Tasia Custodia could not be with us yet again this week. She teased us, misled us into thinking she'd be here, but then something else came up, and we will bug her relentlessly about that next week. But it's okay because she did another YouTube video, which we'll talk about later toward the end of this show, and it ties into a lot of what we'll be talking about today for the bulk of the show. But first, before we get too carried away, if you want to find out more about us at Momentous, you can visit momentous.tv/links, momentous.tv/team for social links for all our Momentous team members. And of course, you can find the audio-only version of the show at momentous.tv/podcast, as well as Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, and Amazon Music. Hooray! All right, of course, it never fails. There's always one thing. Don't have the links ready to go. And here we go. First, a little bit of follow-up, and guess what? It's mostly about AI until such point as we get around to doing our AI-only show, which we'll see if that happens. It's a good thing we didn't do like an NFT-only show. That wouldn't have lasted all that long.
So are NFTs like last week's news?
They're still there, but the hype cycle, we're in the trough of disillusionment now.
They're still not fungible, so I mean, that's still see what they do on the label.
Yeah, and let's not even talk about the fact that some platforms such as OpenSea finally relented and stopped enforcing the post-primary sale royalties mechanism. So kind of kneecapping a lot of the purpose of, or one of the benefits of the smart contracts associated with NFTs, so that original artists could get a cut of subsequent resales. Imagine if you were selling tickets for a concert, reselling them on StubHub or something like that. If the original artist that you were going to see, the musician, got a cut of that resale ticket, that's the same kind of idea that would have been enforced with NFTs until people were circumventing that whole mechanism. And then large platforms like OpenSea, some of the largest platforms that actually sell NFTs, they relented and finally stopped enforcing it too. It's like, anyway, we digress. We digress. It's so easy to digress.
We're looking for NFTs too. That's NFTs 2 launch. We'll be right back on it.
Exactly. And maybe that'll be on the Solana platform. There's stuff happening there. Again, maybe. All right, let's get on to a little bit of roundup of AI news, which is, of course, been the hotness for the last year or so. And one of the ongoing challenges we've seen with these image generation platforms, such as Stable Diffusion and Midjourney, and even Bing Image Creator now, among others, is, and Will, you know this, and Gray, you know this too, I'm sure, not only do they have problems with fingers and teeth, they're getting better, but text. In text in images gets totally messed up. And that's a huge tell. So now Stability AI, which are the makers of Stable Diffusion, has released a new model for image generation called Deep Floyd AI, which helps in your text to image generation and gets the text right. So again, as with anything, your mileage may vary, but some of the early examples, I played with it a little bit and it seemed to work reasonably well. I'm just going to pull up a quick image here that I tried. And I used an existing prompt that they had for a baseball cap. I changed the colors, I changed the text, and look, Vancouver Canucks on a white baseball cap with green and blue trim. And it actually got the words. And I asked for it to do it in a varsity style font. Not bad. If you zoom in, you can see some distortion in the texture of the fabric. But again, just think of how far we've come and how far we've yet to go. So in my single test, a sample size of 1, it got text looking not too shabby. So Will, how much of a game changer is this going to be for your image generation? Should Midjourney, which you tend to use more, finally integrate this kind of capability?
I think that's a big thing for me. I mean, I don't know how much I would use it, but it certainly is something that creeps in once in a while, even when you're not intending it. So I'm just going to throw one out here. You might say, I would like a retro futuristic VCR and television. And then suddenly it would just throw VCR over something, or make up fake text, like at the bottom of the TV or something, and it would just be gobbledygook. And that would be one of the things, as someone who, tweaks and changes lighting and levels and contrast, but that's also something I would go in and take out right away with like clone stamping tools and content aware fills and stuff like that. So it would, at least from the end of not having to do that kind of stuff, it would be better if, not that maybe in the example I gave, I would even intend it to say VCR, but at least it might not totally be an eyesore, or it might be a happy accident or something like that. But right now it's pretty much a no-go. I don't know if you guys see this, but I see quite a few people trying to make logos or mock-ups for websites. Classic stylish website for a plumbing business, and it's like this. I'm like, hey, guy, I could tell you that was not going to work. Or, logo for a bespoke suit manufacturer. It's like, oh, that's going to be hot garbage. So
great name for a brand.
Yeah.
Hot garbage soup.
Hot garbage suits. So yeah, it's like those type of things. It to your point, Tristan, it just fails on, because it wants to try to add text, because at least it knows enough that those things tend to have text in it. So I would advise people, if they're going to try to do a logo, or the odd time I've done something like that, like symbols or something, or icons, I say no words in the prompts.
Yeah.
Like, no letters, no words. I'll add that in after, thanks, because you're just going to muck it up. So,
and even back to your VCR example, if you wanted to have it so that it said 12 a.m., because VCRs have the flashing 12 a.m., make it so it actually says 12 a.m. and not something out of like, that from the album cover of Ghost in the Machine by the Police, right?
Yeah. Well, and that's, again, if that was something I wanted to do, I would go in and do it myself right now. And I would most likely just try to do some like prompt gymnastics to try to get it to make a screen without any text on it. And again, say things like no words, blank screen. Instead of, it's much easier, like you said, to say the screen says 12 a.m.
Well, ultimately, our goal is to remove you entirely from the equation when it comes to your own image generation there. So, but I totally get what you're saying. Sometimes it's faster just to do the Photoshop afterwards rather than prompt engineering until the cows come home. Yes, Greg.
I was going to say, something's got to generate the thought. So, currently. So,
well, it's interesting that you raise that point, because I was listening to something today where we've been talking over the last few weeks how prompt engineering is becoming such a crucial skill. And some people, of course, say, okay, well, that's the next big thing you should be studying. Prompt engineering. And before, a couple of years ago, is learn how to program for the blockchain, and whatnot. And now it's like, learn prompt engineering. But what's actually coming out of some of the AI development companies themselves is saying, hey, maybe pump the brakes a little, folks, because the AIs themselves, the large language models themselves, are actually getting pretty good at engineering prompts for themselves. And that's a trick that you can use. Is like, you just ask it, what would be a best kind of prompt to use for ChatGPT? You can ask ChatGPT how to prompt it. You can also ask it for tips on how to prompt Midjourney or some of the other AI generation platforms too. So prompt engineering is great to understand in general. You can always tweak it, but it's like, yo, dog, I heard you like prompt engineering, so we put some prompt engineering in your AI so you can AI while you prompt engineer. Something like that.
My only question, though, does ChatGPT, I know there's other text generation tools, but does ChatGPT, is it aware of Midjourney? Because isn't Midjourney too new?
Well, I, as of September 2021, I think Midjourney may have been around in an early form, because by the time we started talking about it last spring, I think it was already up to version 3 or 4, and that would have been spring 2022. Yeah. But then again, there is like I'm on ChatGPT Plus, and I just got access to plugins and web browsing. So what you can do is add a link when it works. Sometimes it can't read the links properly, but when it does, you can give it some information, and you could train it that way. It's like, okay, with this in mind, the information at this link destination, about maybe it's on best practices for prompting Midjourney, it'll learn. And alternatively, you could always try Bing Chat, which is connected to the web too. Gray, did you have something to add?
I did, yeah. So this is actually, it's trained on the, was it Lion B image library. So billions of image and text pairs, which is kind of it's a good way to go about it. And it's obviously learned from this massive data set. The thing that I found interesting in that press release was the ability to remove watermarked content. To remove
we're talking about Stability AI here, yeah.
Stability AI, to deploy to remove NSFW content and inappropriate content, which means that this particular iteration is phenomenal for censorship. It's great for violating someone's copyright by removing watermarks from images. Great, congratulations. You're really not helping in your case here. And then also, if we're looking at something and saying we want to be able to nuke this out of a certain image set, this tool is custom built for that, which we're going to get to regulation a little bit later, but this is sort of one of those, like, it's listed as a feature, and it's a feature that makes me go, yeah, but.
So the next Instagram hashtag campaign, hashtag free the AI nipple, coming to you in 3, 2, 1.
And we got a great poster for it.
Oh.
Courtesy of William Silver. Yeah. All right. Our next little AI update. There are a number of voice generation platforms out there powered by AI, and they've really taken things to the next level. We've been using a few of those for some demos for clients in our work at Limestone Learning, and some clients even opt to use some of these for their actual delivered courses as a way to make the most of their budgets and whatnot, because the voices have gotten so darn good. Well, 11 Labs with their latest release, has gotten ridiculously good, and they do multilingual voice, and it's wild. And there's an example here that unfortunately this won't share through Restream, but a few fellows have had a chance to listen to this. It's basically someone has gone, when you're a public figure, there's lots of your voice out there, whether you're a celebrity, a politician, an athlete, TV, movie star, regular streamer. There's so much of your voice out there that you can help inform these models, and you can build your own models with tools like this, but then get your voice or these other voices to speak in multiple languages. And this, in the show notes, we'll have a link to this tweet, which was shared, which was 30 seconds of Joe Rogan, who was, comedian and, Fear Factor host and longtime podcaster now, of him speaking literally perfect North American Spanish. It is wild. So again, probably not, I say perfect, it's probably not 100% perfect to a native speaker, but it's getting so good now for a lot of purposes. It's perfectly suitable. So again, just imagine what it's going to be like in a year from now. And in future, so I can't wait till the day that we have our own momentous live stream, when we have all 4 of us back together in AI form with the voices and the faces. Seriously, we could probably do that within a year or 2. And then we could we don't even have to phone it in. Our AIs could do it.
I'll make my test.
Exactly. Some other quick AI news from the last couple of weeks that we didn't get a chance to get to in previous episodes. Samsung bans ChatGPT and other AI chatbots after a data leak blunder. Now, this ties into something that Will has mentioned in the past. So what has happened is some developers at Samsung were using ChatGPT to help them with coding. And they inadvertently shared some proprietary source code with ChatGPT, which may or may not come back to bite them in the butt. But people have to remember is that every time you're uploading something or pasting something into ChatGPT, it could serve to further inform its language model in the future. It just gets absorbed into the brain. So Samsung has realized that some of its developers are doing this, and they're like, nope, you you do not do this, because we notice that some of you are, and this could end up could end up having a bad time for the corporate operation, because some of these so much of what's existing in the ChatGPT language model has been informed from open source code that people have uploaded to places like GitHub, and there may be certain elements that you could start to see, especially if there were very specific techniques that certain developers use, or if there are certain comments in the code, there are certain flags that could cause things to be identifiable to a person or organization. Similarly, when we're using tools like ChatGPT to help with certain aspects of business, we make sure to strip out any personally identifiable information, whether it's names of our team members, of our company, of our clients, company names and whatnot too, because you don't want that stuff going up into the large language model for GPT-5 when that eventually comes out there. Will, anything, do you want to just refresh us on some of the that coding angle? I know you've touched on that before.
Yeah, I mean, I think there is a bit of a nuance here, which is, like I've used it in my personal life for, my site or other projects that I've worked on to figure out some relatively simple code like HTML, just because I'm lazy or I'm hitting a roadblock or something like that, or JavaScript or something like that. But I think the big concern is when large corporations, coders are putting in large amounts of code or proprietary code that's written or has algorithms or has custom elements in it, and are then asking ChatGPT to write more code or figure out what's wrong with code, because ChatGPT can help you with that. That's now part of ChatGPT. So if someone said, how does the Samsung operating system work? It's like, oh, here's the code for the Samsung operating system. So
just the trade secrets part. No, not to worry.
Yeah. So I think if you are going to ask ChatGPT, like, hey, I'm having trouble putting 3 boxes in this HTML code using this CSS. Can you help me do a third one that wraps underneath in a mobile media format? And it will probably help you with that. And that's no problem, because that's just HTML code, right? That's not proprietary. But when you start talking about these intellectual secrets, or maybe even worse, unreleased projects, you're working on a project and you've thrown that code in there. So yeah, I think that's where people are being careful, because that's one of the main things I see, both myself and other people that I know who code for various things, is that it can help you when you get stuck or when you can't figure something out, or it can just be a second pair of eyes, like, hey, why is this not working the way I think it should, kind of thing.
Yeah, it's when people are uploading giant patches of code and asking one of these tools to help debug it, which they can be pretty helpful at. That's when you get into sketchy territory there. But for our benefit, we're looking forward to maybe someone from Tesla inadvertently uploading a bunch of full self-driving code, so we can get our Lego Mindstorms projects to like drive on their own. Why not, right?
Yeah.
You can do that in the lab, Greg. Yeah. All right. Just another quickie in terms of AI follow-up. We did touch on this a few weeks ago, probably maybe a couple of months ago now. And this came up with someone I know recently, because more and more normal folks, not just techies, more normal folks are becoming aware of ChatGPT. And this is just a quick public service announcement reminder. There are no official ChatGPT apps available on the app stores from Apple or Google as of yet. There are a number of related apps, some of whom are using GPT 3.5 and GPT 4 as their language model, and they license from OpenAI, but don't download anything that says that's a ChatGPT app, because it could very well be a scam. Now, if you are exploring some of the other services that use models like GPT or what we're seeing from Anthropic and Google and or Facebook. There's some program. We talked about Poe, which is an app you can download that uses multiple language models in there. Just make sure that you are using the links from the actual websites of those organizations, and don't just like search in your app store willy-nilly, because you, as much as Apple and Google claim to be vetting things, sketchy stuff does leak through there. So just a quick little reminder, if the ChatGPT is a website, and you can save it on your home screen on your smart device, your smartphone, or your tablet, and you can use it kind of like an app, but there are no official ChatGPT apps. So proceed with caution. And if you have any questions, you can always drop them in the comments. All right, moving on to a bit more, just a little bit more AI news, but this is more in terms of issues. And just today, there were some congressional hearings in the United States. They had Sam Altman come up and testify before Congress. Before we get into the quick overview of that, there was a few weeks ago, there was that open letter signed by a number of tech leaders, including Elon Musk, saying that, we need to have a pause on the development of AI, particularly OpenAI with GPT-4. They're saying, we've got to put a pause on this. We don't want GPT-5 to come out too soon, because we're seeing, logarithmic, if not exponential, improvements in the number of parameters that these large language models can handle, the number of tokens, which a token can be a character, a word, an idea in a conversation, and the more that they can keep in their in the language model's short-term memory when having a conversation, the more powerful it can get, the more you're able to copy and paste into a conversation at once. So these things are getting more and more powerful. And a number of these tech leaders were like, whoa, let's put the brakes on things. And we discussed whether we thought this was like them just wanting OpenAI to have to slow down so they can catch up. Now, one of the perspectives that was shared just today, actually, and particularly, with the headline, "Why Elon Musk is Right About Needing to Regulate AI Now." And the gist of this particular article is that for all of the other, potential dangers that we've talked about, and of course, people often go straight to like Terminator scenario, but one of the key things in this article, I think it makes a pretty good point, and this ties into what we'll be talking about next with the congressional hearings, is that the sooner and I'm not a big fan of regulation in general, but sometimes you need it, like for safety and whatnot. But the sooner that the lawmakers can more fully understand the technology and its implications, and politicians are famously not great at that, especially when we're ruled by gerontocracy, and many of whom are well beyond natural retirement or traditional retirement ages and whatnot. But one of the key things is saying is that the sooner we get regulations in, the sooner we can nip the politicization of AI in the bud. We've seen in previous tech, trends, such as crypto, for example, that it was very late for politicians and regulators to get involved. And what happened, and Gray, I think you might be able to comment on this, is that people kind of got into their camps, and crypto almost became a left-right issue. Mm-hmm. Yep. And where there's some people who may be naturally sort of liberal-minded were like, well, no, crypto has this potential for people in developing countries and whatnot, and regimes with flaky dollars and the like, unstable currencies. And then so you had these people who were naturally maybe supportive of this sort of thing, were found themselves against it, because you have people on the other side of the aisle who were for it, the libertarian types and whatnot. So that's kind of the point of this article. It's kind of interesting. It's like getting into this issue early before people get into their camps. Now, Gray, based on what you've seen with previous issues like crypto and perhaps others, where the tribal sorting happened because the lawmakers took their sweet time to get involved, what are your thoughts on this perspective here?
I think it's actually the right perspective. Looking at this, we're seeing AI obviously grow at a very fast rate. It has the potential to not just, create these two divided political camps, but to actually put all of us in a very, very difficult position, as it takes advantage of human work and isn't paying for it. The fact that it can do that, the fact that it will probably make right convincing arguments about how it's not doing that, is actually the most dangerous thing. Like we now have something that is smarter than Donald Trump, who could do worse things than he was trying to do when he first came into office. This is, we need to be able to look at this and go, this is not written by a human. This is written by a collective mind that is bent on fulfilling this one goal. The fairness doctrine was repealed in the US. I think it was like late 80s, early 90s. And so we've seen humans, when they're capable of pursuing a political goal free of the burden of truth, can do very dangerous things. There's a scene in Star Trek Picard where, they're basically looking and Data's like, they need this mass amount of calculations done in a very short time. And Data's the guy. This is kind of what we're up against. There's this insurmountable goal of swaying humanity in a given direction. And this thing that's responsible to no one that could do it. Yeah, we need to get that in. We need to get it in fast.
Because one of the other political motivations that there may exist for not regulating AI is to be able to use its tremendous capability to further toxify the information landscape, especially as we're a year and a half away from the next US presidential election. So there may be certain interests that are like, oh, no, let's just keep it wide open so we can continue to use these tools to generate deepfakes or generate false stories or create plausible deniability. We've talked about that, like the flip side of things. Oh, no, that wasn't me. That was actually a deepfake. And things are going to get harder and harder to tell what's real and what's not. So there could be political motivations for lack of regulation. So it's interesting to see this all kind of happen in real time much earlier than we've seen with things like crypto or even like the internet, the World Wide Web itself, where it took a while for certain lawmakers to wake up to some of the implications there and busy catch up regulating. And again, we'd want to always have a light touch, I think, wherever possible with these things, so as not to stifle innovation. So it's finding that middle path to regulate around the edges where there are legitimate dangers, but also creating enough white space there for people to really see what the power of these models can do, these machine learning and AI models can do, without destroying the world.
I think the other thing too is that we're on the cusp of, or we're in the heart of a new technology, and we don't know its full path or what it's going to end up doing. And people used to have these conversations about things like television sets, or when the computer first came in, we're not going to have to work anymore. We can have 3-day weeks or whatever, or the internet was going to destroy everything. So I think there's often a lot of hype and fear about things that we don't know where it's going to go. And obviously you need a hand, you need to be cautious of it, but I think there is also a camp that tends to freak out about these things. So I think that's also a good point, is it's something that some people jump on and just go, oh, the sky is falling, this is the end of humanity.
Yeah, so the earlier this can be a bipartisan issue, that that's great, because there's so much division, so much tribalism. So let's get together from various political perspectives and try to navigate these issues in a mindful manner. So speaking of which, there, as mentioned, there was a U.S. Senate hearing today where the Sam Altman, the CEO of OpenAI, got the congressional hearing grilling. And we're not going to dive too deep into this, but I just wanted to review this. There's been a few articles that had some of the top takeaways, and I'll just touch on a few of these things, and we'll leave the links in the show notes for further reading. One of the interesting highlights was Senate Chairman Richard Blumenthal actually used his own AI-generated voice recording and ChatGPT for the opening remarks. So the kind of stunt that people like us have been pulling on podcasts and YouTube videos and whatnot, where it's like, oh, by the way, what I just read to you was generated by ChatGPT. And they did this in this congressional hearing by, and maybe he had an assistant help out, but the extra layer was that it was actually in his own voice. So we talked about 11 Labs and others just a few minutes ago that can do this voice cloning too. So that was kind of cool. And it really helped to demonstrate, rather than just talking about issues, actually being able to demonstrate And Gray and Will, you both know this from when we've taught classes, right? It's one thing to stand at the front of a room and say, oh, you talk in theory about search engine optimization or digital marketing or writing for the web or web design or whatever. It's like, oh, actually, maybe we should look at some examples and we can do some show and tell. So it's exactly the sort of lesson that they're taking to the congressional hearing, which actually demonstrated a bit more knowledge and conversance with this particular issue. There's some other issues that got touched on were the fears about job replacement, the notion of regulation as discussed. That seems to be a bipartisan issue at the moment, the need to regulate. Misinformation is still a huge concern. One senator, Marsha Blackburn, made the example of she heard some song that was basically a deepfake of Garth Brooks and was a little concerned. I mean, people kind of make fun of this example. We've talked about it in the past a few weeks ago with all these Kanye. Kanye sings Adele, Kanye sings Gautier, Kanye sings all these songs. Well, this Marsha Blackburn was concerned about Garth Brooks being deepfaked and singing other songs as well. So I mean, that does raise the issue that we've touched on about how much does one owns one voice, for example. So there's so much stuff. And then, of course, in this one-day hearing, they all agreed that national security, well, that's such a big issue. We're going to table that for that issue and cover that another day, because they could spend probably a whole week on national security implications of artificial intelligence, because we know that other regimes around the world are pouring lots and lots of research dollars into AI for things like surveillance and defense. And when you talk about how you can, I think we've spoken in the past about AI-powered drones that would have image recognition technology for targeted assassinations and stuff. We have whole organizations like StopKillerRobots.org concerned with these very dangers for years now. So that is 6 key themes that came out, and then we'll include in the show notes another article that has 9 takeaways there that include a few other points as well. Gray, any observations about what we're seeing from the U.S. government on this? Again, these early days talking about these concerns and possible regulatory solutions.
They get this far more than they get crypto. It's like there is understanding there, which is heartening. Maybe it's something that's easier to understand. Maybe it's the threat to themselves that I think they can wrap their heads around. But I'm not having the same head slamming into desk moments that I had watching them try to and fail to really understand crypto in general. So
it's Garth Brooks. That's what helped them understand.
Yeah, they can get that.
Yeah. That and BTS, and we're hitting it from all angles of the aisle here. So yeah, I'm heartened to a degree.
I wonder how much of that is due to the fact that the onboarding for something like ChatGPT and and things like Bing Image Creator is so much easier than onboarding into your typical crypto platform. Like, oh, my nephew told me about Bitcoin. How do I do this? Blah blah blah. And so it was a lot trickier to get people using the tech as opposed to this case where like so many people have used tools like ChatGPT and others. We had 100 million users within the first 2 months. The fastest growth of any tech platform ever. So it's quite possible that a lot of these lawmakers have actually had a chance to fiddle with these things on their computer or their smartphone.
Can I check out another theory? And I know I'm just playing devil's advocate, but I do believe this. And I know you might disagree with me, but I think the three of us can look at NFTs or cryptocurrency and see benefit or see what it's there for. I think it's a harder thing to convince most people of. I think especially NFTs was something that was like, what do you mean I don't own the thing? It's just the chain of the thing that I own? Well, I don't care about that. That's dumb.
And I'm burning fossil fuels to buy it? What?
Yeah. So, I mean, I think like that just explaining it, like there was just too much of a barrier for people. And I think it was never really like, and I mean, I could be wrong. Maybe it's going to take over the world and everything, but I think it was just too hard for people to really get down to it. I think the other thing that, especially NFTs, and it was exciting, sort of the different experiments that people were doing, like concert tickets and records that you get as part of the NFT. But it's sort of like the flat Earth theory. Like there was not one thing. There wasn't one thing that you could understand. There wasn't one underlying principle to it, right? So it's just like,
well, it's decentralization and the blockchain and sovereign digital personal sovereignty, and there's a lot of
that's a non-seller for most people. So if you boil it down, most people would be like, don't care, too complicated, not going to figure it out. So I think, but when you start giving examples of like, especially senators, where you can impersonate their voices or impersonate their faces, now that's scary. So they can get behind that. So yeah. So I think that's the uptick that you're seeing, is that it's an easier explanation, sort of just reiterating what you guys said, but with other examples.
Yeah, the opportunity to play with these tools and have that real world experience, and these AI tools being so much more accessible, I think definitely are a big part of that as well. So moving on to one other little AI bit of follow-up before we get into talking about Google I/O, is it's a bit of a hack, but it's kind of fun, is that there's an article on Hackaday a couple of months ago. MS-DOS client brings ChatGPT to the IBM PC. And it's not like this is breaking news or anything, but we haven't had a chance to include it in previous episodes. So this is basically someone figured out how to hook up an old luggable, IBM PC compatible luggable. No, it's actually not compatible. It's an IBM 5155 portable PC, which is a PC XT with a 4.77 megahertz 8088 CPU, 640 kilobytes of RAM, and a CGA video card. So I had one of those beautiful amber monitors. So not entirely different to the Osborne's and K-Pro luggables that we've seen in the past. But the cool thing is that this person got it wired up and through some connectivity to another internet capable device, and had it so you're having your little text chat, because back in the day, people were used to the DOS operating system, which was all before the graphical user interface became more widespread. But it's almost like war games vibes. Would you like to play a game? And you're having a little conversation, typing in, just like back in the late '60s with Eliza, the text-based psychiatrist that we've talked about a couple of times here. So, Will, I know you like retro tech.
Yeah.
And would you like to maybe dig out your dad's old Osborne and get ChatGPT running?
Well, that would be cool. I mean, I think it's an interesting experiment. I don't know, people are doing it more, or are just seeing it more, and now the algorithm knows. But I send you some things like off of Instagram, things like this about people setting up computers to run Windows and stuff like that. The other one, sorry, I know this is kind of a side story, but the other one that has really been fascinating me, and I think I sent you one of them, is the guy using old CRTs to either run like a second monitor for his Mac, and the gymnastics that he has to go to get it to those. Remember those old like rabbit ear 2 prongs? And like he has to like go through
so many adapters,
15 adapters or 10 adapters or whatever. But the other guy that's really cool is the guy who's doing sort of art with old CRTs and video. And then he's having like basically, what's it called? There's a name for it. It's a trick where you have like a piece of film suspended and the light hits it, so it looks 3-dimensional. Something ghost. What's it called? Pepper's Ghost. Oh, cool. So he's doing like Pepper's Ghost things with old CRTs. So I'm definitely in for this, is what I'm saying. I like the idea of mucking with old tech and adding some new ideas and making it sort of this Blade Runner future thing.
Yeah, the retro futuristic. Actually, this ties into something that we'll be talking about in a little bit as regards TV and film. But let's segue into some new AI news as part of Google I/O, which is Google's big developers conference that happened last week on Wednesday, so it was just after our live stream. So we just have to catch up on a little bit of news there for those who are interested. And one of the major announcements was Palm 2, which Palm is the large language model that is behind Google Bard and a lot of other AI initiatives at Google. And basically, they announced the next generation, and of course, it's much more powerful. But one of the key things is that it is integrated into not only Google Bard chatbot, but Gmail, Google Docs, Google Sheets, and YouTube. So this will be living in their data centers and power their public and private facing AI efforts for the next time to come, until, of course, they upgrade to Palm 3 and the like. So they are not sitting still. There were some, when they released Bard, Google Bard publicly, not too long ago, some people thought it felt a little half-baked. It may be rushed out, but obviously Google has had lots of stuff going on internally. And the latest updates to Bard have been better and more powerful. So our very own Teja Custodi has done a number of videos on that, talking about Bard and how it compares to ChatGPT and Bing Chat and the like as well. One of the key things was Palm 2's reasoning abilities, because with these language models, they don't actually think or know things per se. They are good at languages, bad at math. Sound familiar?
Bringing it up from things that we mentioned earlier, they actually point out in that Google I/O about improved coding. So they talk about getting better at coding and being more proficient at coding languages, because that is one of the big use cases, is like you say, doing some bug testing and just sanity checks on stuff.
Exactly. So there were lots of stuff talked about at Google I/O. So we're just going to touch on a few of the highlights, including some of the cool-looking hardware things. So in addition to all the AI stuff, they did talk about the latest version of Android. And I think when we reunite with Teja, she can fill us in on some of those details there. And the key things that we're going to touch on today are the hardware announcements. The first of which was the product that they teased last year, which was the Google Pixel tablet. And at the time, again, it felt a little underwhelming to a lot of tech observers. But now that it's been announced, there's a couple of interesting innovations, and one really interesting price innovation on it as well. So basically, this is another kick at the Android tablet can. It's funny, I remember it described a few years ago that there wasn't a tablet market, that there was an iPad market, and then there was like a handful of Android tablets. Part of the problem being is that Android was never very well optimized for tablet use, and a lot of the apps were just kind of blown up smartphone apps. Again, Google has had previous tablets that they've come to market with. Samsung sells a fair number. They're probably the dominant player in the Android tablet market, but Google is taking, like I said, another kick at the can to try and show other developers that this is how you do a tablet. But again, they're not to necessarily dominate the market, but just lead by example. And one of the angles that they've taken with this is to make it into kind of like a Google Nest Hub, which was previously a dedicated device that would have maybe a built-in speaker and be used for the smart home features of in your household. But now they've got a multi-purpose tablet, sort of like an iPad. But one of the key things is that it actually ships with a dock, the magnetic dock that you can stick it onto, and it turns it into kind of like a Google Nest Hub. Now, some people are criticizing because there's no real speakers, high quality speakers built into this, so it feels like a missed opportunity. But the fact that they've got this whole thing for, I think it's like $4.99 US, and that includes the dock for it, that for standing on it, seems to be a pretty aggressive play here. And there's a case that has an interesting metal ring on it that you can keep the case on and still dock the device. And spec-wise, it's fine. It's not going to set the world on fire. But for those people in the Google Android ecosystem, it seems to be a pretty capable device. And the icing on the cake is that smart home home hub sort of functionality there. Will, from what I recall, you're not super deep into the smart home, but would you wish, given that you've had iPads for a while, are you interested in that sort of idea? Do you wish Apple or others would have something that would be very easy to dock to, especially if it was aggressively priced in this, so you could have it sitting there when you're not using it, playing slideshows or acting as a control center for smart home devices, etc.?
Not that much. I mean, occasionally, but to be honest, that's not the use case for me for tablets, and that's not really how I do things around the house. So I'm not too interested in this. I like cool docks that make it easier for me to use my tablet for the things I already use it for, but in terms of using it as like brains for my connected home, I'm not interested in.
How about you, Gray? You've been in the smart home world for a while, and we're with this Google's revisiting the tablet world with the latest iteration of the Pixel tablet here, which has that cool looking little stand that you can magnetically attach your Pixel tablet and use it for your family photos, or for to be a control center for your smart home. I assume you're not going to be switching to the Android ecosystem anytime soon, but does that use case appeal to you for when you're not actively using your iPad?
I mean, it appeals to me on two fronts. One, for older iPads, this is actually something that I would love to do with it. Mm-hmm. I've got a 13-inch 2018 Pro that I use every once in a while, and so that would be something that would be sort of, I could see a use case for that. The integrated like in-wall solutions we're seeing fewer of, just because, again, I think folks have kind of looked at it and went, okay, the iPad right in the wall is, you're kind of limiting yourself, especially when form factors do change. Also, the second sort of place where I could see a use for this is the mom and dad factor. When you're looking at I want to get them another iPad, because my dad's got my Generation 2 Mini that he likes reading things on. But that's obviously, it's so far out of date now that that's pretty much all he can do is that. But them having an iPad that it had a home where it could drop it down, it could control things like their Ecobee, their Apple HomePod minis, and also FaceTime calls, I think would be sort of the ideal place where I would use something like this. And so, I mean, it's a nice little stand. It's great. Currently right now you could do something like the Magic Keyboard, which could kind of fill that role, along with giving the thing a darn keyboard to use. But this just seems like a cleaner setup. I like it.
All right, moving on to the next hardware. One of the other hardware highlights covered in Google I/O 2023 was the Pixel 7a. So the last couple of years, Google has had this interesting strategy where they've announced like the regular flagship in the fall. And so we had the 5 and the 5 Pro, I believe, the 6 and the 6 Pro. But then, about 6 months later in the springtime, we would see the 5A and then the 6A. Well, they've done it again with releasing the 7A. And again, with the last couple of years, it seems like Google's been intentionally leaking details. Some people say they're just like a really leaky ship, but it feels intentional, because there's so many details that come out early about these devices. And in this case, the 6A, the 5A and the 6A have pretty decent reviews for the price, and really, really good value compared to what you might pay for a flagship smartphone nowadays. So this is no exception, and probably the best example where the specs are almost the same as the Pixel 7 that came out last fall. Not the 7 Pro, of course, but the Pixel 7, which is pretty decent. It's got wireless charging, 90 hertz refresh rate, and this phone, which is some flagship specs, not all, but it's only $500 US. Now, Will, I know that you went ultra premium in your last. You got the 13 Pro Max. Now, do you feel like next time when it comes for you to upgrade your smartphone that you would go for such a beast, or do you feel like there's untapped potential there, that maybe you're being overserved, and that you would consider something less powerful because you don't need so much power, because maybe you're using other devices like your laptop for more intensive operations and you're not shooting lots of 8K video or stuff like that, or smaller size. Again, with this Pixel 7a, this is more of a 6.1 inch as opposed to like a 6.7 inch. And 6.1 seems to be the default now for mainstream smartphones nowadays. Any thoughts on either of those aspects regarding power and size?
I would say give me all the power, all the size, and make it cheaper.
All right, so Apple is definitely going to release the iPhone 15 Pro Max at $500 US. Yeah,
you heard it here first.
Yeah,
snowballs meet hell, right? So,
yeah, do it, make it happen.
Well, in the other smartphone news, especially from Google, and this is something I wish that friend of the show Jamie Reynolds was available to chat with us this week. But maybe next time he's on, he can give us his thoughts. Is the long-awaited, long-rumored Pixel Fold made its appearance at Google I/O 2023. So following in the footsteps of Samsung, which is on their fourth generation of the Samsung Galaxy Fold. And now we've seen other options from, what was that? Royal FlexPi, I believe, was one of the other offerings out there. We've seen, I think Motorola had some foldables. So the Pixel Fold is not the flip phone. It's the fold phone. So it basically goes from a smartphone, a normal-ish smartphone size, and it folds out into like a small tablet. I believe it's 7.8 inches. Now, what the people are saying so far is that it's not as skinny as the Samsung Galaxy Fold 4, so it's a bit more usable. The outside screen is a bit more usable for straight-up smartphone use, and that being said, but it's thinner as well. The hinge seems decent. It's got water resistance, but not dust resistance. And so we always have to be careful with the hinges. How long will these hinges last? And of course, they've tested them for hundreds of thousands of opens and closes. But depending on how fidgety you are, you might be able to burn through those opens and closes in a few months. Now, the only catch with this very capable looking device, and apparently the cameras are great, much better than some of the cameras we've seen on other foldable devices, and the ability to, because it's got a full screen on the outside as opposed to like a partial screen on the outer side of the device, you can use that outer screen as a viewfinder and the proper back camera for selfies as opposed to the front-facing camera, which is usually a little less capable that we use on most of our smartphones for selfies. But the catch here is that we're looking at $1,799 US to get into the door. So Gray, I'm going to ask you, is Google high on their own supply here? Especially given at the other end of the spectrum, they've got something for $500 US, which is very capable. Of course, this has, 3 times more screen. Mm-hmm. It's got infinity times more hinge. It's got, I believe, one extra camera in there, perhaps. This is like, we're in the ultra premium territory here.
Yes.
Is this nuts? And if not, is this something Apple should be? Everyone's like, when's Apple going to do this, et cetera, et cetera. So what are your general thoughts of the Google Pixel Fold, which has been rumored for so long? And people are generally excited because it seems like a capable device.
This is the one that gets me to switch to Android. This right here.
You heard it here, folks.
No. I do like the form factor quite a bit. I like the wider front. I think that's a win. Because the Samsung just feels too skinny. If I'm looking for a smaller phone, I'd want the iPhone 5 style. As far as the hinge goes, man, they should get me to test these things because I would break that thing in no time. Like my fidgetability is way up. We need a name for that factor. Like just the something factor is your fidget factor of just like how often you gotta click things. So $17.99 though it's right on par for all the other why did you buy this folding phones. I'm seeing people with them, specifically like the flip phone style, and it's like all it does is make me want to find my Game Boy Advance SP, but like that, I'm not seeing the benefit, right? When you shove it in your pocket, it's thicker. You've got to do that to get the screen size out. I feel like old man yells at cloud, right? Like, no, it is the children who are wrong, but this introduces all of the things that I don't want. A screen with a crease and just naturally lower fidelity. The moving parts of a hinge built in. Should Apple do this? You know what? Honestly, if at WWDC, Tim was like, "Good morning, folding phones," I'd be like, "Okay, why?"
Sign me up.
I'd be like, "Why? Like, show me
why
I need
on,
this."
Let's be honest.
Was that? No, I wouldn't. I wouldn't be in. Right?
Not even the Apple one.
Because I got to know. And I'm not seeing it right now. If they have the compelling reason, great. I know that's the thing. I'm a fairly imaginative person. I'm not seeing it. So for those who love folding phones, bless you. Someone has to. Not me.
One of the use cases they showed was that you have like the screen on one side, and you got like a video that's playing like what do you call that? Wrong ratio or whatever.
Yeah. Okay,
and then you open it up and it expands. Guess what? Rotate your phone. Like, that's not a great use case. Like, I mean, that's cool. It's cool, but it's a gimmick, right? That's a gimmick. You can still do that. Maybe not as large, but you can still get like, I don't know. It's
actually that one right there. The spreadsheet. Yeah. That right there is a terrible experience on my phone. Way better on my tablet, and I got to carry 2 devices. But this right here, if I was like just a spreadsheet assassin, boom, that's my phone. That's about it.
It's interesting. The design language on it is definite iPhone 6 vibes. It's like they smushed 2 iPhone 6s together with a hinge, and it's not ugly. Again, the crease.
The iPhone 6 did bend.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I had 4 of them. With the 6 Plus, that is. Oh, don't even
stop putting it in your back pocket.
Yeah, skinny jeans. But yeah, like
you're a monster.
But the crease, the crease is still a thing. Apparently, it's less visible than on the Samsung offerings. We are 4 generations deep into Samsung's offerings here, so it seems like this is a trend that's not going away anytime soon. Google is just getting into it. One of the modes it has here, I can't remember what they call it, but where you flip it up and it's where you could have stuff on the bottom and on the top, kind of in an L shape. Yeah, it reminds me of my Nokia communicator, where I used you'd have the QWERTY keyboard and then the screen sitting upright.
The Apple eMate.
This is good for video conferencing, perhaps. Say again?
Yeah, the Apple eMate.
Yes. Oh, yes, right. Except like a fraction of the size and 100% less translucent plastic from the 90s.
Which is disappointing.
So those are a few highlights from Google's I/O. We focus mostly on the hardware, a little bit on their AI announcements. And if you're interested in learning more about what was announced, there are a couple of articles that we will link in the show notes from Wired, if you can get past their paywall, if you have enough free articles left, or even The Verge. There are even more tools that they talk about, their AI tools and software features that are being built into the various platforms. I think one of the clever callbacks, and that kind of describes what's happening now with these language models, especially as they get integrated into search, it's called the Ask Jeevesification of online search. Because in the late 90s, we saw, a rival to, I think, I'm not sure if it was before or after Google, but we had so many different first generation search engines out there, whether it was Yahoo or Dogpile or Mama or Excite.
AltaVista.
And then AltaVista was kind of like the new gold standard, and that reigned for a couple of years. And then Google came along and totally upended things with how it ranked things using PageRank and relevance based on backlinks and the like. But one of the tools that I used for a while, I was rather fond of, was Ask Jeeves, because you could type in natural language questions and it would do a reasonable job of parsing your question and giving you relevant results. But Google's results end up just being so much better, and for a while more relevant and less filled with spam. They had some spam troubles in the early 2000s, but I have to say I'm a little nostalgic for Ask Jeeves. So maybe we will see the resurrection of Ask Jeeves with a full-on AI brain. Speaking of, in particular, there's another quick little thing I wanted to talk about here. It was this one artificial intelligence-ish movie that we saw back in the 80s was War Games. That was one that captured the imagination of a generation, talking about the the possible dangers of AI and nuclear weapons and like. Let's get all those things in there. But there's a neat article today on The Verge. It's called "Plugged In and Logged On: A History of the Internet on Film and Television," and it mentions movies like Hackers and the X-Files, particularly the Lone Gunmen, and their use of the internet depicted on screen. And War Games was mentioned, a dystopian horror called Mind Warp that I'm not familiar with, movies like Videodrome. You can even get into things like Lawnmower Man or The Matrix if you really wanted to keep pushing things, Sneakers, and others. So we'll link this article in the show notes for those who are interested. But I wanted to ask you fellas, what are some of your favorite depictions of tech? It could be the internet or tech hardware. It could be programming in TV or films, because sometimes, whether it's laughable or actually pretty credible. One laughable example I'll give you is Swordfish, in which we're expected to believe that Hugh Jackman is a computer nerd. It's like, so there's a human side of it too in these depictions, not just the tech side. And not to mention, so much like hacking is displayed as like navigating these 3D universes to inject malware and whatnot. And some of the stuff is like,
I know this. It's a Unix system.
Exactly. So, Gray, what anything come to mind in depictions of internet access or tech in general in TV or film that you're fond of for positive or negative reasons?
Two. And the first one was Hugh Jackman in Swordfish. Like, he literally read my mind on that one. The piano playing and the multiple screens and the, just amazing. And that's almost a follow on from Keanu Reeves in Johnny Mnemonic. Right. Like they're spiritually brothers. But the one that I wanted to talk about here is in Star Trek Lower Decks. Okay. And that is Jeffrey Combs as Agimus, the homicidal, self-aware, megalomaniac computer. Star Trek, here's the crazy thing, actually has a ban on AI in world because Control, one of the first AIs, went crazy and tried to kill everybody in the galaxy. And there's a whole thing in Star Trek Picard about how AI is set to kill us, and the Romulans have a secret society dedicated to make sure that AI never rises. And Jeffrey Combs, who has played like 9 or 10 different characters across multiple series, shows up as the voice of this computer, and it is a freaking delight. So it's just, he's a megalomaniac computer who doesn't quite have power, so he's always trying like, maybe you could plug me into your communicator. It's wonderful.
You want to.
Right.
Good choice. Will, any depictions of internet or tech come to mind?
So as you mentioned, I've taught classes, and I used to bring up a lot of examples, particularly because there was one where I would give the history of the web and coding. And so I would give some of these examples. I used to read out the movie poster for the net, which is very hard dated now. And that's sort of when the internet was very much like in the zeitgeist, and it was the scary new thing that scared people. So it ages really hard if you've seen it recently. And so, I mean, they're using CRTs. It's practically DOS.
Hey, CRTs making a comeback, man. We were just talking about that.
Yeah. The other two are TV shows. I'll bring them up quickly. One is the original Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., where I forget the character, but she became Quake, I think. Yeah. And she was a social media expert, but yet she hacked the internet. And it was like, I don't think they quite know what a social media expert is and what like a programmer is. Like, it's just kind of mashing those two together. And the final one I'll bring up, which was one of the most disappointing shows of all time, and I hated it with a flaming passion, and I only watched the first episode and I refused to watch it after, was the show named Scorpion. And you might not remember it, but it was a bunch of nerdy tech people, and they were like a special agency of like super intelligent people that could figure out any problem. And of course, there was a very good looking female and a very good looking guy, that there was sexual tension the whole time, and you knew that they were going to get together by the end of the first season or the second season or something. Anyways, the first episode, a plane goes rogue or something, and they need to update it, so they get an Ethernet cable and they hook it up to a flying plane to take control of it. So they have like a huge Ethernet cable that's attached to the plane,
like the refueling.
Yeah. So it's just like so ridiculous. Anyways, there I go.
Genius.
One little bit of non-internet tech that I enjoyed was in Ferris Bueller's Day Off. I think I saw that when I was 15, and he had a pretty expensive like sampler in his bedroom, and he was using it to like fake being sick and call into school and pretend he was coughing and all that kind of stuff. I thought that was kind of cute, and maybe like I got to get a sampler. But a more recent example was in John Wick Chapter 2. And it's not really realistic, but for some reason, they had Commodore VIC-20s being used as keyboards connected up to these green screen terminals that were not displaying Commodore VIC-20 text by any stretch of the imagination. It actually looked more like Apple II, but it was these kind of almost what do you call them, suicide girls type administrators who were entering these things. They were like the dispatchers for the assassins and whatnot. And it was kind of cool. It was definitely aesthetic, a quasi steampunk sort of aesthetic, but with tattoos and Commodore VIC-20s and green screen monitors.
It's weird because it almost feels like the system should be air gapped, but it's clearly communicating across the network using pneumatic tubes as well.
Exactly.
The lore in that universe is amazing.
Yeah.
All right, let's wrap up and get to our picks of the week. And starting with Mr. Silver. Will, what is your pick of the week?
My pick of the week is Star Wars: The Bad Batch. This is following a common theme, that I finished up the Clone Wars. It only took me 3 years to do with my wife. I had actually watched the first 5 seasons, but I started from scratch. And then we watched Tales of the Jedi, which was my pick last week. And then my pick this week is The Bad Batch, which I am actually really, really enjoying. And so I highly recommend it. Now, I know the cartoon shows aren't for everyone. I will say that the hallmark of these Star Wars animated series, so the Clone Wars, Rebels, this one included, is a annoying kid protagonist, and this is the least annoying kid protagonist of all of those 3 series that I've mentioned. So I highly recommend it. Ahsoka redeems herself by the end, by the way, but she is obnoxious in the first couple of seasons of the Clone Wars. Ezra, there is no redemption for him. He's obnoxious all the way through Rebels. So I see some people doubting me. That's cool. But yeah, I really dislike Ezra with a flaming passion. I like all the other characters. Love me some Chopper. But yeah, so I highly recommend Bad Batch. There's not really too much I dislike about it. I really enjoy also seeing this is set after what would be Return of the Jedi, so episode 6, and we sort of see the consequences of the rise of the Empire, and what happens to those clones that were the army in the first prequels, the first 3 movies, and what happens to them afterwards. And I'm finding it very interesting. And now it's a deep dive, it's a deep cut, it's for nerds, but guilty as charged.
And I was going to ask when this takes place for those who are only mostly familiar with the live action movies or TV shows. So you're saying it's after Return of the Jedi? Is it?
Or sorry, no, it's after. It's after Revenge of the Sith.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So it's before. Yeah. Before the original trilogy. Okay.
Yeah. Empire's at its height. Yeah.
Gotcha. Cool. Gray, what is your momentous pick this week? Oh, sorry.
I was going to say,
you can watch that on Disney Plus, just so anyone's looking for the Bad Batch. That is on Disney Plus, correct?
Yeah.
All right. Great. Take it away.
Ezra redeemed himself by getting flung across the galaxy. That was.
It's true. It's true. He had 5 minutes of redemption.
So here's the thing. Mandalorian, we're hearing about Grand Admiral Thrawn coming back this time.
Yeah, well, yeah, we've seen some teasers of Ezra, so maybe he'll be better.
Yeah. So this is the IKEA SCADAS, and I've got a bunch of them all over the place. They're $19.99 for the skinny ones. This is $29.99. Behind me, I've got a wall control unit, which is amazing. Like, this is load bearing and can handle heavy stuff. This is for everything else, for organization. I absolutely love these things because you can mount them to a wall. They can all connect to there. You can also bolt them to the side of a desk. This is changing my life from an organizational perspective. I can find all of my tools. I can find all of the stuff. So there's a lab rebuild going on. Bunch of coolness stuff coming. But this right here, I've got more of them throughout the house. So it's pretty cool. At $30, they're quite functional. Don't stand on their own. But you can also get lots of cool little pieces for them as well that clip in, which you can see some of them here. They've got like the little J hooks and things. There's a little magnetic strip. There are
Build-A-Bear.
Yeah, boxes and bins that kind of, that clip in, which is really great. But the baskets, there are shelves, there are document retainers, all sorts of really cool, neat things. They even have, so the black stuff is actually their gamer branded one with ridiculous non-text on it. But two of these hold a keyboard really nicely onto the shelf. And I've got 3 or 4 different keyboards that I cycle through. So super handy. It's my pick of the week. It's great.
Nice.
Good stuff. Very quickly, because I've got to rush away to dinner reservations. My pick of the week is kind of on theme. I actually changed it at the last minute when we were talking about internet and tech as depicted in TV and film. And I don't think I've really talked about this show before because it ended before we started Momentous Live. And that is the series on AMC called Halt and Catch Fire. For anyone that is at all interested in the history of computers and the internet, I definitely check it out. It stars Lee Pace and others, and it is great. The first season starts with a PC clone manufacturer based in Texas, I believe. It's loosely based on the story of Compaq. And then each season, these various characters go off to start other enterprises over the course of about, I think, 10, 15 years or so. There's one season where they have a BBS's bulletin board system. And by the end, it's the dawn of the web.
Nice.
Very cool. Lots of nerd content there. Great acting. A little melodramatic at times. But I definitely recommend it if you can find that on any streaming services, AMC and AMC Plus, perhaps, and it probably comes and goes on other streaming services like Netflix and whatnot. But I'll find a link for where it's currently playing and include that in the show notes as well. So that's Halt and Catch Fire. And lastly, just one of us with a project this week, and as mentioned, our colleague Tasia has a video where she recaps Google I/O 2023 in a mere 12 minutes and 13 seconds. So you can find that video at youtube.com/Tasia Custodi and all of her work at TasiaCustodi.com. And I just realized that my laptop has 8% battery left.
Nice.
Even though it's plugged in.
Under the wire.
I'm plugged in, but I'm not getting enough juice from this little brick. So it's been slowly declining as time goes on.
Pulling a Hugh Jackman there.
So, yeah. Exactly. And of course, you can find out more about us at momentous.tv/links, momentous.tv/team, and the audio version of this very show at momentous.tv/podcasts and all your favorite podcast platforms. Okay. Wonderful work, gentlemen. Glad to have you. Tasia, we miss you. Hope to see you next week. And until then, we hope your week is truly momentous.